All right, these are going to be the notes on Imperial China. This is from the second half of Chapter 5 of your AP book. The origins of Imperial China, 221 BCE to 220 CE. So we're looking at about a 400-year period. We've already talked about the Shang Dynasty and the Zhou Dynasty, so you want to go back and look at those in Chapter 2 of your textbook to review some of that information. Around 221 BCE, China was in a warring period. From the Qin in the Wei Valley, the Qin built the first real Chinese empire, but it quickly fell away and gave rise to the Han in 202 BCE, and that's going to last until 220 CE. Let's look quickly at Qin unification. So Qin unification lasts from about 221 to 206 BCE. The Qin were able to unite in the north because we've got three reasons that you need to know why the Qin were able to unite in the northern part of China. Remember the two major river valleys, the Yellow and the Yangtze River, so the Yellow River being in the north. Number one, a tough military who was good at fighting. That's what they had in the north, a tough military who was good at fighting. And the people that they were good at fighting were the barbarians. They had a young ruler that was ruthless and very ambitious, and legalistic methods in a very strong centralized government. These are all things that are going to allow the Qin to be successful. Not successful for long, but successful nonetheless. Zhang, the ruler, came to power at age 13, and he gave himself the name, make sure I pronounce it correctly. I'm gonna be looking at the book every once in a while to make sure I pronounce these words correctly, these names. Shi Huangdi. And I believe I have, there he is, Shi Huangdi. Yeah, or First Emperor is his name. The Qin stopped eldest sons from inheriting everything and required estates to be broken up. So these are some of the things that the Qin are going to do to establish control over China. They stopped the eldest son from inheriting everything and required estates to be broken up. That's going to benefit the government. They set up a law code that'll be beneficial to everybody. Standardized weights and measurements. Think about why standardizing weights and measurements are such an important thing. It's going to allow transactions and trade to happen much more smoothly. They're going to have a coinage system, writing, even the axles on carts are going to be standardized. They're going to have the same, the carts, the axles, the width of the wheels on the carts are going to be the same. They're going to standardize that and say every cart needs to have the same wheelbase. And that's going to enable them to have ruts in the roads that they have in Imperial China to make it easier for carts to travel on. The Qin were legalistic. Look into that a little bit about legalism. Just how strict the legalists were. They hated Confucianists. Actually, if you want some reading on legalism, please ask me. It's just a little extra reading that I could have for you. The Qin legalists, they hated Confucianists. And so you want to spend a little time looking at, and we can talk about this in class, but what's the difference between legalism and Confucianism, and why don't those sides mesh? The Qin fought and pushed nomads further north. I've got a map here that you can see. The Great Wall of China was finished to keep the nomads from coming back in. The Qin government was very oppressive, and they had mandatory labor and military service. So it was mandatory for you to serve in the military, not for your life, but for a couple years. When Shi Huangdi died in 210 BCE, his son took over, but his son was a very weak ruler, and a lot of uprisings broke out against the Qin's harsh treatment of the people. So the people at this time had had enough, and so they're going to have uprising. They see the death of Qin Huangdi as an excuse. Now we can revolt against the government. And Shi Huangdi is the guy who was buried with the Terracotta Soldiers. So you've got the Great Wall of China there, the Terracotta Soldiers, which we talked about extensively in class the other day. Now, the Han Dynasty. This is what we really see as kind of the early golden age of China. And so this is what we're going to compare to the Roman Empire. The long reign of the Han, 202 BCE to 220 CE. Liu Bang, known as Gaozu, established the Han Dynasty And one of the things that he did when he established the Han Dynasty was he renounced the harshness of the Qin, which people are going to like this. He was very frugal, meaning tight with money, and he got the economy back on track. The Han had to appease the nomads because their military wasn't very strong. So instead of where the Qin had a very strong military and they could fight against the nomads, the Han did not have a very strong military, so they had to appease those nomads. When the emperor would die, his son would take over the throne. Oftentimes, when a father would die, if the son was very young, he would be manipulated by old rulers. And this is how Emperor Wu came to power. His father died when he was a young boy, but his grandmother and his uncle also died soon after that. And so that enabled Emperor Wu to rule China at a very young age on his own. Now, remember, we've been talking about historical bias, and so one of the things that we need to keep in mind, a lot of the information we have about Emperor Wu comes from his chief astrologer by the name of Simu Xin. Simu Xin has the nickname the father of history in China, so very much like Herodotus in Greece. But a lot of what Simu Xin, a lot of what he says has some negative spin on it, and most historians believe that's because Emperor Wu had him castrated. So this was a policy that a lot of emperors are going to embrace, and it's going to spread. It doesn't just happen in China, it happens in a lot of places. But a lot of these court officials and people that are in contact with the emperor, this even happens a little bit in Europe, the people become eunuchs, and what it means is that the men are castrated. And so the thought is they do this so that the officials that are come in contact with the king's wives and the emperor's wives and things like that, they won't be tempted to get into sexual relationships with them because it's physically impossible. Wu increased the power of the military and attacked nomads, and he expanded the size of the empire. So you can see here the vastness of the Han Dynasty. If you want to go back and compare it to the size of the Qin, you can see the size of the Qin there compared to the size of the Han. Wu also established Confucianism as the chief religion and established a university and had promising students sent there. So not everybody could go to the university, just the most promising students could go to the university. Confucianism was seen as good because the empire got well-educated leaders, but the rulers had to deal with the expectation that they would model good moral behavior. So keep that in mind. Confucianism is going to promote education. It is going to promote study because they're going to take these Confucianist exams to get into the higher positions in the kind of federal bureaucracy of this empire. But remember, Confucianism prompts moral behavior, and so these emperors are going to be held to a pretty high standard. So let's look at Chinese society. So there's an image of Emperor Wu there. All right, Chinese society. The oldest male was the leader of the family. Women had no real role outside of the homes. The capital was now, let me make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Chinese society, they don't have it. Xi'an is the capital. Xi'an is the Xian is how you spell it, and they made it into a very modernized capital. The elite enjoyed things like fine silks, horse-drawn carriages. The Han Chinese were very much into entertainment shows and things like that. The gentry, which is the land-owning class, these are the wealthy people. You could know, if you're comparing it to Rome, they would be called the plebeians, all right? No, wait, patricians. Let me make sure I got that right. Sometimes I mix those two up. All right, well, make sure you look at that. The land-owning people. So the gentry are equated to the land-owning people in Rome. All right, what else do we have here? Make sure I'm getting you guys the things that you need for the test and to help you out with this essay that you're going to have to write. The gentry were exempt from taxes and military service, and, oh, hold on, I'm making a video. And their kids had an advantage because they had time to study. Merchants could succeed, but they were looked at very suspiciously. So keep in mind that the Han Chinese, they don't favor merchants the way that the Romans did. All right, the last thing that we have here, the Han period was very rich in intellectual development. History was written and organized. A lot of technology in the Han Empire, technology like the watermill, the horse collar, and the watermill is used for grinding grain. The horse collar, and that was not as constricting on the horse as the previous ways they used horses for plowing. Paper is going to replace bamboo. They're going to have stronger horses. They're going to get into horse breeding and breeding stronger horses. They're going to have the crossbow trigger. So it's not that they necessarily invent the crossbow, but they incorporate a trigger onto the crossbow to make it much better in battle. And they're going to have very extensive road systems that are going to allow the armies to move very quickly. They're also going to build canals and seismograph to register the size of earthquakes. Religion was based on nature. Taoism is going to become an important religion, and Buddhism is going to start to creep in from India. So the fall of the Han, what do you need to know about why didn't the Han not last forever? Corruption within the government, attacks by non-Chinese on the frontier, so the nomads are going to start attacking a lot more. The peasants are very frustrated and hungry, and the Han really fail at their reforms. Every time an empire starts to go down, they try to make reforms, they try to make changes to better the empire, but the Han Chinese fail at these reforms, so that eventually leads to the downfall of the Han Chinese.